Hello, everyone. I'm taking a step back here to our first week's work that we've done. So far, everyone's doing really well in class. This is a quantitative research class, and everybody's doing well. I'm happy to say it's not uh, a really in-depth study, but trying to get your feet on the ground when it comes to qualitative research. I just want to make sure you understand some of the basics, because if you don't get this right here, then you're going to have problems later on. So it's almost like, uh, you know, uh, in algebra, if you don't know the order of operations, algebra is going to be really cryptic to you. So this is sort of gives you that first hand look at uh, uh, quantitative research. I'm sorry, qualitative research. First of all, let's change this to qualitative. Oh gosh, qualitative, qualitative research. And bear with me, I just got that mixed up a little bit, so I see where the confusion lies. So anyway, we are starting up, and I just want to just go through this first set of slides. These slides I got from the textbook that I've used a couple years ago and last year. I didn't want you to buy the textbook, so I kind of was putting some of the stuff that I'm able to put on legally on Canvas, so you can just read through it. But I did hear some issues. It's sort of a little bit of a tough read, and I admit that myself. It's a bit of a tough read. So let's try to get through this. It's not as tough as it sounds, so we'll deal with it as we go along. Again, I'm not using this particular textbook at whole, because if I had to, it'd be a 15-week course. So I'm taking pieces here and pieces there, trying to get it down to a real tight course where you're going to get something out of it. So when we look at the qualitative research, the first thing, let me get this into a slideshow view here. Oh, you know what? Let me leave it. I'll leave it like this. I'm sure you guys can see it. Let me just get a little bigger here. Okay. Um, so the first slide talks about defining qualitative research. And it really begins with the assumption of using interpretive and theoretical frameworks. And what that means is it's not looking at things that can be sort of data driven or numbers driven. This looks at different variables, and it looks at the human behavior side of issues and concerns, areas of interest. So it looks qualitative looks at um, data from a different perspective. Typically, we started out our, um, our world of research in mostly a quantitative fashion, which is numbers driven, and that works. That works well in a scientific method, because it can be replicated over and over again. If one pill for Alzheimer's has a certain effect, and you know that 8 milligrams per day does that, you can actually do a quantitative research by showing the numbers and showing what the impact was. And that's fine. You can grab all that stuff in the numbers world, the data, and really tease it out, and it can be replicated very simply. You know that 50 milligrams of something is going to work here, and it's going to work there, it's going to work somewhere else, aside from some side effects or whatever. But in qualitative research, it's not so simplistic in that way. There could be, because we're dealing with the human dynamic, human behavior, a lot of times things are not seen in a numbers format, a way we could calculate it. So we have to look at things in through themes and through criteria that's mostly behavioral in its foundation. So we want to make sure that we have these frameworks for students to identify things. So qualitative really takes the research process and looks at the behavioral side of the human condition. Um, Research problems address the meaning of individuals or groups or ascribe to a social or human problem. Again, in the world of social sciences, in the world of behavioral sciences, it's not black and white, and it's not one number as opposed to another number. Or we're not looking at quantities of an issue. We're looking at the quality of something. So qualitative researchers use an emerging qualitative approach to inquiry. What they're looking at, and again, the researcher is looking for ways to improve on existing research or ways to begin a new theory and something that's completely new, a new way of doing something. A lot of times, a qualitative researcher has a different approach to something that's already been studied, but a different approach may have a lasting impact or a different way of doing something. And we see this in counseling a lot. That's why I refer to counseling on a few of these slides. You see that in counseling. What you're looking at is you have a practitioner person doing research, or a research practitioner, if you will, for an example, and they found that this person could be dealing with children with some kind of autism or something. And the existing research, the existing literature they had, gave a certain set of ways of doing things. But you may find that this certain set of way of doing things that's already been researched, tried and true, is not working for this one particular individual. So now you have to like think outside the box. As a practitioner researcher, you're thinking outside the box and say, well, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to make this person respond to this treatment, or do something where I can change the behavior that's more acceptable, whatever. And that's where your research juices start going as a practitioner. So that's one of the beauties of the qualitative researcher. They can do those things, and then they come up with maybe a new way of doing a study, or maybe a new way of a new treatment, or an improvement on a certain treatment that we're doing for children with autism. So we want to be able to look at those different aspects and continue moving forward. Um, Data collection would be in a natural setting sense. You want to look at collecting data where they're not manipulated in any way that they wouldn't be doing their everyday lives. Again, I'll go back to the children with autism. You just don't want to go there and say, "Hey, look, I'm researching you, so do it," because the behavior is going to change. They're going to say what you want to hear. They may say what you don't want to hear. There's some kind of change if you do not, as a researcher, go into the field and collecting it in its natural state, because then that kind of impacts on the outcome. I hope that's clear. So you kind of want to stand back and be an observer and see what's happening. Sometimes you have to be a little deceptive, without being overly deceptive. You may go in there and be, oh, this is Randy Merced. He's a substitute teacher, and he's going to help with the paints or whatever. But I'm really doing some research. They've accepted me as a substitute teacher, and playing around with the paints. But I'm looking at other things. I'm looking at other behaviors. I may tell the instructor to do something different and see how they react to it. Because they don't know I am the researcher and I'm doing an observation, they may react in a natural sort of way. So I think that's an example of how we want to collect data in a natural setting. Data analysis can be both inductive and deductive, and analysis establishes a pattern or theme. Now, when you're doing quantitative research, again, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with quantities of things, um, and you can grab data from different data sets in a quantitative world. Remember that quantitative, the quantity. So you as a researcher in quantitative, and I'm trying to give you a little different perspective. Quantitative, you may go into a census, type in a couple of criteria. You want to get the demographics of a certain city, a population, and now you have the number you want, and it goes into your spreadsheet as a data point. In qualitative research, you're establishing patterns or themes. It's a little different. First of all, you have to be creative in what you're doing as far as looking at these patterns. You might say, oh, look, this is a pattern. I see a pattern emerging from this amount of data, this amount of observations I have. And in this pattern, I see a theme happening. There may be the same theme, maybe the children get mad, every time we introduce this treatment in there, or put something, or do something, or the children may be happy, or they may be non-responsive. So you start seeing themes. These things cannot be captured in quantitative research, but it can be captured in qualitative research. So how do we report qualitative research? They may involve the written report or a presentation. It may be out of a dissertation or a paper that you're writing. And when you do this sort of investigation, you're going to find um, that you want to be able to show some kind of synergy in what you're saying and what you're doing, and point out the themes, and have this report ready, because you're going to be questioned. Where'd you get your data from? How'd you collect it? How many was there that responded in this way? And these are your conclusions, and whatever it is. Um, this includes the voices of the participants. You may be doing an investigation that requires interviews, where you're interviewing the subjects. You may be talking to them about television, how much TV they watch. Do they watch cartoons? Talking about little kids here, and do they watch good cartoons? And you have to classify what's good and what's bad. Good cartoons might be very flowery, singing stuff, and what's bad is you see some in their minds it might be like fighting games or whatever. So you have to address all that stuff. Um, addresses deflect. Reporting should be addressing the reflexivity of the research, and that's an important term. I put that on the bottom of this PowerPoint. Um, they can do this in a number of ways, and when I talk about reflexivity, what we're talking about is how the researcher is engaged in the actual research. They may be part of the research. They're asking the questions. They may be sharing time together with them. I've seen researchers go into prisons and become prison inmates for a little bit, just to get some information or whatever. So what their attitude towards prisoners are might be a question of reflexivity. So you've got to see exactly where you stand as far as how this research is put together. Reflexivity can be divided into two types: prospective and retrospective. Prospective reflexivity refers to the effects of a researcher on the study, whereas retrospective is the effects of the researcher after the study, understanding the bidirectional relationships in the research. So that's pretty important. Yeah, the reporting qualitative research provides a complex description and interpretation of a problem. So again, it's not numbers. It's not saying or causation or correlation. Those are terms for quantitative research. It's about providing information and sometimes a very complex problem. That's not just a numbers-driven thing. And there's discussions on its contributions in the literature or call for change. So what you're trying to do is trying to figure out, at the end of the day, what you want to have is a paper that's going to um, uh, push for more discussion, add to an existing discussion we had, or maybe a call for a change. Maybe the paper or the research outcome is a legislative change in a certain area. Again, a lot of times where when it comes to politics, people don't spend the money. The politicians don't spend the money unless there's research behind it to show that if I spend this much money based on this research, this should be the outcome. And that goes with higher education, K through 12, mental health resources coming from the cities and states and federal government. All that money comes out of good research data. The next slide talks about there's a lot of classifications for qualitative research, but the most common that I found is in health, behavior sciences. Um, you have to have a systematic process of inquiry. So we want to make sure that the approaches that we have and how we do this uh, is in some format where people can look at it clearly and say, you know what, this is what this is. It's a, let me bring it up. It's either a narrative approach, a phenomenological approach. It could be backed in grounded theory, ethnography, or case study. So let's go through these each, so you get a better understanding of it. And I've seen some papers written in two or three of these approaches, and they're wrong. I mean, they're just a lot of words that's not the reader doesn't want to get into a lot of stuff. There's mixed methods cases. It's a little tough to deal with. But basically, the five approaches are the ones we're going to talk about. The narrative approach can be defined as collecting and analyzing the accounts of people and to just tell and describe experiences and offer interpretation. So it's sort of like just what this word means. It's a narrative about what's happening. So you're actually talking to people, trying to describe the experiences, and then trying to get some kind of interpretation as to what's happening. Phenomenology is an approach to qualitative research that focuses on the commonality of the lived experience within a particular group. So what's the phenomenology that's happening? How is this lived experience impacting someone? Um, I sat with a few students who did a really nice study on drug addiction in Kensington. It's sort of like a ground zero for addicts and addiction. So they use a phenomenological approach to focus on how this lived experience is within the vote. So they did their interviews, they observed, and they looked at these lived experiences of these drug addicts that were doing this thing, and then they came up with their answers to what should be done. Um, Grounded theory, very popular, and you're going to see this word a lot, grounded theory. It refers to a systematic sort of inductive method of conducting qualitative research aimed towards theory development. That's a mouthful. What grounded theory does is it works from the ground up, going up. You are going to go into a study. You don't really have a theory yet, but you're going to look at stuff, you're going to do things, and then develop a theory starts to develop from all that work you do. So you know what? This is a theory I've developed because I've observed, I've listened to, and I've got information from people, and this is a theory that I'm developing from this. So that's the grounded theory approach. Ethnographic research is a qualitative approach that involves observing variables in the natural element or habitats. It's almost the same as going to the Kensington deal and dealing with those people who are dealing with the drug addictions. So there's some ethnographic, and it's an in-depth study that deals with the ethnographic type of people that are out there that may have mutual. Let me see if I can read this. Okay, let's see here. I lost my page. So comparing the five approaches we just spoke about, if you examine them side by side, each of them differ. The process of the research is different. The introduction to the study, to its purpose and research, The data collection may be different. The data analysis may be different. The way you write the report can be different. So there are volumes of literature on these types of approaches. I wouldn't get too caught up in that stuff. You can actually Google Scholar some information and get a head start on this stuff. And I really would like for this class to really take a look at um, the online resources for the library at Rosemont. Take a look at what's out there and how to use those online resources effectively. One can go into that stuff, and this if you sit in Google Scholar, you'll find almost everything you need in Google Scholar. But you might need to go into another database that may be more targeted towards the population you're looking for or the studies you're looking for. Take a look at some of those studies, see how they're laid out, and then you'll start seeing a sort of a tempo. You start seeing just a lot of similarities on how the data is collected, a lot of similarities on how the data is analyzed. And it'll even tell you, some of them will literally tell you this is a narrative report, or this is a phenomenological study on blah, 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 or this study is based on grounded theory. And it'll tell you right there in the study. So you want to make sure that you take a look at those things just so you can get a good understanding of these types of qualitative researches. Case study, I didn't go over case study. Oh my goodness, wait a minute, we go over case study. Case studies are I want to make sure we get this because case studies are very popular. They do investigation on single person or group, an event or a community. I've done a case study on community colleges. I wanted to see if their workforce development programs are working well. So I did a case study analysis and did a report on that. I took a number of colleges. I interviewed some people. I talked to the folks involved in the strategic planning for workforce development, and I developed a case study, a qualitative research paper from those interviews. And it's important to understand the different approaches so that you don't get mired in doing one and then figure out, oh, I should have done it this way. It's up to you as a researcher how you pull that off. And again, we're taking baby steps here, so don't worry too much about it. What I'd like for you to do is take a look at, whatever interests you, whether it's child psychology, counseling, higher education, K through 12, and go to the library and look for a research paper, a qualitative research paper, and see if it does tell you whether it's grounded in any one of these approaches here. Let's see what else I have. I think that's the end of my slides here, so that's not too bad. I hope this helped a little. One of the things in case study research, Yin is a big name. Please do not buy any of these books or any, but look at the papers that came up with. Robert Yin does a lot of work with case study research. How to do these things, designing and the methodologies for it. Creswell does a lot with qualitative research and different parts of those things. You're going to see those names a lot in these things. And the word grounded theory, you might well Google grounded theory and try to understand it as best as you can, because you're going to see grounded theory a lot in qualitative research. Because there's a lot of times when someone doesn't understand the phenomenon that's happening. So they go into it head first, and then they figure out a theory while they're doing the research. So that grounded theory there's a lot of it out there. So I hope this helped. If you want me to keep doing these things, just let me know. I want to help you guys out as best as I can. Don't worry too much about any of the written work, the discussion questions. Just give me some answers. I want to know what you're thinking. I don't need you going through all kinds of books and papers to try to find the right answer. I want to know how you feel about things more than anything else. Okay, so have a great day and have a good weekend. Okay, take care now. Bye bye.